So, JJ, under your byline, it says, all the blood, sweat, and tears of entrepreneurship. What on earth do you know about entrepreneurship? What is your story?
Funny you should ask. So before becoming a journalist, I was actually an entrepreneur myself, which is a period in my life that I have mixed feelings about. It was great. I'm very fond of this industry and of this landscape, but I was also, we just did a terrible job. I mean, we had an awful company. We did it for a little over a year. It was called squidjob.com, which is embarrassing.
I'm sorry, what was it called?
It was called Squid Job.
Squid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Squid Job, which has unfortunate sexual connotations as well, which we realized late in the game. Yeah. So we ended up being sued by Angie's List, which was a competitor of ours. So we were in the local services industry. We wanted to connect people with the best local professionals in their area. And we were 23, we were fresh out of college, we had no experience. I hadn't even previously been interested in either that industry or entrepreneurship. I just kind of allowed myself to be persuaded into it and eventually grew to love it, but we were just really bad at it. So I did that for about a year and a half, quit kind of in a huff, had a very tough parting with my co-founder, and luckily, miraculously, I would say, kind of landed into journalism and into covering the thing I had been doing for a year and a half not very well. So I think at this point, I certainly feel like I cover it better than I do it.
Those who can't
write about
teach,
it, yes.
Yeah, or write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting because I'm a fan and I've followed some of your cutting-edge reporting, and I think the thing that really jumped out the most at me was the most grueling thing you did recently, which was, I think, a week on a yacht in the Adriatic, sailing around Croatia. So is that the kind of reporting that you find yourself doing and qualified to do, or are there more hard-hitting, I hope, stories that you tackle?
No, that's about as hard-hitting as it gets.
And I noticed you don't have a tan, so it just all didn't go very well for you.
That was months ago, yeah.
So we talked a little bit. I think we said one of the top tech reporters in the U.S. at a very tender age, I might add.
I doubt it, and I think the phrasing was most influential, but
But I will ask you, having been now on both sides, what are the elements of a good story that makes a good news story,
Sure.
specifically for you, because of course Forbes has an online and an offline component.
Yeah. So I think it's very different. So first of all, I think that people and founders and CEOs often lose sight of exactly what they want to get out of PR. They're more focused on tactics and on getting just this nice positive piece without really thinking about how that relates to their overall strategy and the ends that they're trying to achieve in their business over the long term. So I think it first starts with an understanding of what your goals actually are. And if it's vanity, that's fine, but just be realistic with yourself and understand that you're putting out all of this energy and wasting some of these resources to soothe your own vanity. If you're honest with yourself, that's okay. But there are a lot of things that print can do beyond online in terms of helping establish your brand and helping customers to take you more seriously. So if you're looking to get a print piece, at least for me, and I think often in the tech world and certainly in the startup world, what you're looking for or what we're looking for are generally three things. And if you hit on all three of those, that makes a very compelling story. So the first and most important is kind of rocket ship growth. And, everybody wants to see a Supercell or a Groupon before they crashed. They want to see somebody go from 0 to 100 million in 18 months.
Yep.
And that's very exciting. There are a lot of great tension points that surround that kind of narrative, and it kind of indicates that there's staying power there. Yeah. So people just enjoy writing about that, and I think enjoy reading about that because it's so amazing and unbelievable.
Yeah.
Sure.
What's the second thing?
Hopefully you have a great founding story. hopefully the narrative there is interesting the way that most stories are. You know, so there were tribulations and trials and arguments and near-death experiences, and you couldn't get money, and you were working out of your basement, and whatever. Just we all kind of know what they look like. You lived in the Google campus
for 3 months without being detected. Yeah, things
exactly.
like yeah. That all is good story.
Yeah.
That's good copy.
And we know what those are when we see them, both as journalists and as readers. And part of that, you know, I will say the third piece is just kind of a founder or a set of characters that are sympathetic. You know, you want a good protagonist, somebody that you can relate to and kind of understand, you know, how their character is shaping this company and how the company is kind of a reflection on who they are and where they're going.
What about a good antagonist?
A good antagonist is great as well, and I wish I could find more of those. If you're
truly evil.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a startup looking for press, you probably don't want to have a great antagonist, but we're happy to have you if that's the case.
So, and it's interesting, you started on something, you started actually commenting on my job, which is PR, and I think it's fair to put it on the table that often journalists and PR people are at each other, not on each other's best side, or on two sides when we should actually be on the same side. You consider us as standing in the way of your resources, or even worse, the truth. And you know, we consider you often. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of times that we've had, you know, we've worked with trusted journalists. They've broken embargoes.
Sure.
Those embargoes have actually resulted in maybe even a funding round not being closed. Have truly been harmful to business.
Yeah.
But they're so conscious of their reputation and wanting to have that story, wanting to have that scoop. So, you know, we find ourselves trying to protect our clients and saying, don't talk, don't talk. You, of course, want people to talk, to say things that are, you know, colorful or at least not guarded. And I'm wondering, do you actually think that PR professionals do a disservice to their startup clients? And if so, do you mind telling a few examples?
So I think the answer is probably three-quarters of the time, yes.
Wow.
And I kind of have a different perspective from some of the things that you outlined. So I think there's an inherent tension between PR and journalism in that, at least in my experience, and I've only been doing this, you know, a little over 2 years. I haven't been doing this that long, and I've been doing it in New York and in the tech kind of startup industry. So a fairly small niche of journalism and even business press. But what I see is that, you know, what you have to understand about journalists is that we are kind of trained bullshit detectors. That's our job, is to detect bullshit. And PR people, and I don't think this has to be their job, but somehow it has become their job, is to put out bullshit.
Or saccharine-coated blah, blah.
Right, it's kind of saccharine nonsense that we, as journalists, are just naturally inclined to react, you know, have a visceral negative reaction to. And I don't think it has to be that way, and I would argue that the most effective PR people do not act that way. They actually come at you with some authenticity. They don't insult your intelligence as a journalist, and they kind of tell you how it is, and they give you, you know, warts and all about the company. And in the end, that creates a trust that I think is very valuable, and that PR as an industry, I think, discounts a lot more than it should. And I would say to companies that are considering hiring a PR firm, really look at how this person is representing you, and you know, read the emails that they're sending out to journalists. I honestly feel like you would be horrified the majority of the time if you actually read the stuff that they're saying about you or saw the way that they're interacting.
And you don't mean in a bad way. You just mean it's just so kind of like, this is a revolutionary, you know, breakthrough, blah, 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 which...
Right, it's just fluff.
Yeah.
And you know, that most people would you know, see it and just immediately go, bullshit. Yeah. And journalists especially will do that because that's our job, and that's, you know, we're so cynical just naturally, and then we're trained to be even more cynical. So there's this tension there that to me doesn't make any sense.
Well, don't you think, though, that there's been a dynamic that's set up that PR agencies, people, are measured on their ability to do short-term things like get hits, which drive a spike in traffic. Right. So we're encouraged, or and it's easy to be encouraged to go for the short-term gain at the cost of a longer-term strategy, which you were starting to talk about. And I'll actually add on to that I wrote a thesis in PR, strangely, PR and ethics in public relations. I actually went to seminary, but that's a whole other different discussion. And one thing that I actually grounded my thinking in was, look, I have a responsibility to a client, they're paying me, but I also have a responsibility to a journalist because we're shaping public opinion. Like, there is a court of public opinion, and you should tell the truth, and truth-telling is a very big thing in my firm, because number one, it's the right thing to do. Number two, you will be found out. So choose one reason or the other to tell the truth, but tell the truth. But I do see that a lot of PR people are under pressure to get those quick hits, and one thing we actually do as an agency is we screen potential clients for those ones who look at PR tactically, and we won't work with them because we know we'll just get caught up in that nasty cycle, which ends up, frankly, angering you. And my relationship with you, the journalist, is probably going to be a lot longer than with a client. I might have a client for 2-5 years, especially since our clients are high-growth companies. But I'm probably going to be working with for possibly a lifetime, right? Yeah. So the problem is actually that short-term thinking that you see a lot of CEOs or founders getting into, of hits, 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 not where am I taking this company strategically, what needs to happen next. Have you seen examples of that? Do you think I'm talking out the side of my neck? Or
no, I mean, I've certainly seen examples of that. It's often unclear whether that comes from the PR industry or the PR, the hired PR firm, or the founder itself. It's certainly, if that's happening, it's certainly a reflection that there's either an oversight or just the naivete on the side of the founder. My perspective is that you're building a foundation for your business when you think about your PR strategy, and you want to be very deliberate and very careful and think very deeply about how that message is going to help you achieve those long-term goals without kind of focusing on the short-term spike in traffic or the serotonin spike from your vanity. It's just, I feel like that's often lost, and people really need to keep that in mind when they do PR. If
you were either going to counsel CEOs or you were going to start again, would you be thinking a lot more about the story that you're telling as you're creating the company? Would you?
First and foremost, you have to have a story to tell. So before you even begin to think about PR, you need to have a great company. And sometimes it makes sense in certain companies to think about that earlier rather than later. It depends. Companies are very different. But I would, first and foremost, concentrate on building the company. If that doesn't include PR in the first year or the first 2 years, then don't do it. And actually, think very deeply about how that fits into your overall goals. But if you do decide that, number one, you want to pursue a PR strategy, and number two, you want to hire a PR firm, really look at the person who's going to lead those efforts and the firm that's going to lead those efforts, and ask yourself if you would actually bring that person onto your team, because they are a reflection of who you are, regardless of whether they're a part of your company or not, but they are representing you.
Even onto the C-level team. Like, would you want to
rely on their... Would you trust this person as your consigliere? Yeah, right. As your lieutenant. To shape the message on their own. To have autonomy over the communications of your company. Because often I feel like, and this comes from probably a lack of experience with the industry, with PR and with journalism in general. Founders are often very product-focused or sales-focused, and they don't have a great understanding of how messaging works, and that's fine. But don't just assume that the reality of this industry is just saccharine nonsense, and that's the way it is, and that's the way it always has to be. You actually, I think there is some vetting that can be done to make to make your life a lot easier and to make your message a lot more effective and to endear yourselves to journalists a lot more.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's about the amount of time that we have. I want to thank you for being so honest, especially since this could have devolved into quite a nasty fight. So thank you.
Thanks, Colette.